CertainTeed offers numerous types of Cedar Impressions, shingles, and shakes. In this section, we'll cover the steps for installing double 7 straight-edge perfection shingles, single 7 perfection shingles, triple 5 sawmill shingles, half-round shingles, and individual 5 sawmill shingles. With the exception of the individual 5 sawmill shingles, in general, the other Cedar Impressions panels install similarly. The Cedar Impressions panels must be installed with nails over a solid substrate with nail holding strength such as plywood or OSB, a minimum of 7/16" thick. These products cannot be installed with staples. When cutting Cedar Impressions siding, use a 40-tip carbide blade mounted in the standard, not backwards position. Using this technique will reduce burring. It does not gum up the saw, and the blade stays sharp longer. As with any polymer siding, Cedar Impressions shingles and shakes expand and contract with changes in temperature. For this reason, it is important that you space the panels according to the panel temperature at the time of installation. Failure to provide the proper spacing according to these temperature ranges may result in gaps that are too large or too small, thereby creating the potential for side locking tabs disengaging, panels distorting, or buckling. Each panel has a patented panel thermometer that displays the panel temperature and indicator lines that will guide proper installation. The thermometer is on the upper right-hand corner of the panel, and the indicator lines are on the uppermost corners of each panel. Although the temperature may change throughout the day, the panels must be spaced according to panel temperature at the time of installation. Cells on the thermometer change color to indicate the present temperature. If the panel temperature is 0, align the second panel to the 0 temperature indicator. If it is 30, set it to the 30 line, and so on. If it indicates a temperature of 160, butt the panels tight. Anytime the temperature cell is brighter between two temperatures, position the panel so it is between those two indicator lines. Here is how to install Cedar Impressions D7 straight-edge perfection shingles. Strike a level line around the house and install Cedar Impressions metal starter. If you plan to use Cedar Impressions mitered corner post, as we will, make sure the starter strip is installed to the edge of the corner. An alternative to using starter strip is to use J-channel in place of the starter strip to receive the bottom edge of the panel. Next, mark the position of the corners by marking, then chalking a line 3 inches from the corner. Cedar Impressions panels install from the right to the left. Begin by cutting off the end of the top course of the panel at indicator A, which is located above the nail slots. This will result in a straight edge on the right side of the panel. Starting on the right side of the wall, hook the bottom locking leg of the panel into the starter strip and slide the panel into the corner post or receiving channel. Leave 1/4 inch space between the panel and the corner for expansion. Fasten the panel to the wall by nailing through the center hole of the nailing hem at the top of the panel. This will control the direction of expansion and contraction. Continue nailing the panel with 5 nails, 1 in the right end nail slot, and 1 at each of the quick reference fastening indicators. Drive nails straight, not angled, into solid wood or nailable substrate. Leave 1/8 inch to 1/16 inch between the nail heads and the panel to allow for freedom of movement during expansion and contraction of the panel. Install the next panel by positioning it below the starter strip and next to the first panel. Push in and up to lock the panel into the starter strip and the side tabs of the first panel. Space the second panel according to the panel temperature at the corresponding temperature indicator lines. Nail the panel into position, starting with the round center hole, and then placing the next nail in the right end nail slot so the nail goes through both panels' nail slots simultaneously. Nail the rest of the panel through the centers of the remaining nail slots at the quick reference fastening indicators. Using the same methods of spacing and nailing, install the remaining panels of the first course. For partial panels, you may center pin the panel by placing a nail at each side of the nail slot. To install the second course, begin by cutting off the right side of the panel at indicator B, which is located above the nail slots. Starting on the right side of the wall, hook the bottom locking leg of the panel into the previous course and slide the panel into the corner post or receiving channel. Leave a 1/4 inch space between the panel and the corner for expansion. To control the direction of expansion and contraction, place a nail at each side of the centermost nail slot. Continue the second course as you did the first, spacing the panels according to temperature. Center pinning the panel, connecting adjoining panels, and then fastening the center of the remaining slots at the quick reference indicators. When you reach an outside corner, if you are installing the mitered corner post, cut the panel so it ends 3 inches short of the corner. To install under a window or other opening, install Cedar Impressions undersill trim beneath the window or opening. Cut the panel to fit under the window. Using a snap lock punch, raise tab faces on the outside of the panel a 1/4 inch from the trimmed edge, 6 inches apart. Lock the panel into the previous course. Then, snap the panel in place. Finally, drill a 3/16 inch hole through the center of the panel and install a color-matched nail to control the direction of expansion. In some installation situations, you will not need to install undersill trim before installing a panel under a window. In this case, we had to remove a small amount of the nailing hem to notch the panel out around the window. After securing with a color-matched nail, the final panel beneath the window was cut right near the butt edge, so undersill trim was not needed. To install a panel over a window or opening, cut the panel to fit by measuring from the locking tab of the previous row to the bottom of the receiving pocket. Add 1/8 inch to this measurement. Turn the panel over and, using this measurement, measure from the bottom of the return leg. Cut the panel to this dimension. Install the cut panel by positioning it over the window and into the receiving pocket. Lock the cut panel into the previous course by pushing in and up. The cut edge should be a 1/4 inch below the top of the receiving pocket. Before you continue the installation, now is a good time to install the receiver for the cornice molding, which will finish off the wall. Install the receiver all the way to the edge of the corner. To finish the wall, measure for the last course. This panel should end a 1/4 inch below the flange of the cornice receiver. Rip cut to the proper width. Then use a nail slot punch to punch slots every 6 to 8 inches, a 1/4 inch from the panel edge. Finally, lock in the panel and loose nail in place. Once the siding is installed on both sides of the corner, we will install the mitered corner post. You may find, however, that installing the mitered corner post is easier if you install each corner piece at the same time as you complete each course on both walls, as it allows you to make minor adjustments to the wall panels as you work your way up the wall. Lock the first corner over the siding, being sure it also locks into the starter strip. The top of the corner must be in line with the top of the panel. Nail the corner through the top 2 nail slots. These may be nailed tight. When only one wall can be installed at a time, it is critical that the starter strips be level. This will ensure a proper fit between the corner posts and the panels on the next wall side, as the courses are installed up the wall. When you reach the top of the corner, cut a corner piece to length. Drill nail holes and nail in place. To finish off the top of the wall, snap cornice molding into the cornice receiver. The molding should finish a 1/4 inch from the edge of the topmost corner post piece. At corners, hook the top of the cornice cap over the end of the cornice moldings from both walls and snap the bottom of the cornice cap in place. Alternately, you can slide the cornice cap over one of the cornice moldings until the second cornice molding can be inserted. If installing D7 Staggered Perfection shingles, install staggered mitered corners. They install just like the D9 rough split shakes shown here. These corners have right side cut marks at 1/8 inch increments to allow you to fit the corner to the differing panel heights you may encounter as you finish a course. Trim the corner gap 1 course at a time as needed to fit the panel. Otherwise, the staggered mitered corners install just like the mitered corners already shown. Cedar Impressions single 7-inch panels install very similarly to other Cedar Impressions panels. So be sure to watch our video on installing Cedar Impressions shingles and shakes along with this section before installing. Here are the differences for installing the single 7-inch panels. When installing the first course, you begin by installing a full panel. No trimming is necessary. Be sure to leave 1/4 inch gap between the panel and corner post. Fasten the panel to the wall by first nailing through the round center pin hole in the nailing hem at the top of the panel. Then, continue nailing with 5 nails, 1 in the right end nail slot and 1 at each of the quick reference nail mark indicators. Like other Cedar Impressions panels, leave an 1/8 inch to 1/16 inch between the nail heads and the panel to allow for expansion and contraction. The single 7-inch panel features a nail stop to guide in correct nail head clearance. When installing the next panel, like other Cedar Impressions panels, refer to the panel thermometer to determine proper spacing. Gently tap the outside of the hammer tapper ribs to properly position the panel left or right. Another difference when installing the single 7-inch panels is that when beginning the second course, cut 26 inches off referencing the Easy Measure tape measure to make your cut. Drill a 3/16 inch hole into the center of the remaining nail hem. Then install as you did the previous course. Then, when installing the third course, cut 50 inches off the right side of the panel at indicator 50. And drill a 3/16 inch hole in the center of the nail hem and install. Continue to stagger panel courses, repeating the same process used in the first, second, and third course to ensure a random shingle pattern up the wall. Note, do not follow this pattern when installing on gable end. If installing Cedar Impressions single 7-inch panels with a mitered offset corner post, install the panels 3 inches from the end of the outside wall. For the best appearance and easier installation, we suggest you install the mitered offset corner post as you move up the wall. If you prefer, you can install mitered offset corner posts after the siding has been installed. The mitered offset corner post comes in 4 designs: A, B, C, and D. Install the first course. Then hook the corner A over the siding, making sure it locks into the starter strip. Nail through the top 2 slots. Continue installing the corner pieces as you move up the wall, following a pattern of A, B, C, D, and then repeat. When you reach the top of the corner, cut the corner piece to length, leaving 1/4 inch between the top corner piece and the Cornice receiver. Punch nail slots and nail it in place. Note, reference the corner of the top of this corner piece so you can begin your next corner with the next letter in succession. Finally, install the Cornice molding, followed by the Cornice cap. Cedar Impressions triple 5-inch sawmill shingles install very similarly to other Cedar Impressions panels. So be sure to watch our video on installing Cedar Impressions shingles and shakes, along with this section before installing. Here are the differences for installing the triple 5-inch panels. Strike a level line around the house and install shingle starter strip. If you plan to use restoration millwork corner posts or a pocketed vinyl carpentry corner, hold the starter back to allow room for installation of the corner. If you plan to use the Cedar Impressions triple 5-inch mitered corners, hold the starter back 2 3/4 inches from each end of the wall. This spacing is unique, as all other Cedar Impressions corners require a 3-inch holdback. For the first course, cut off 4 inches from the right side of the panel at the 4-inch indicator. This will create a straight right side edge for the first panel. Install the panel and space it 1/4 inch from the end of the accompanying accessory if installing in temperatures 40 degrees or above, and 3/8 of an inch if below 40 degrees. Fasten the panel to the wall by first nailing through the round center hole in the nailing hem at the top of the panel. Then, continue nailing with 5 nails, 1 in the right end nail slot, and 1 at each of the quick reference nail mark indicators. Like other Cedar Impressions panels, leave 1/8 of an inch to 1/16 of an inch between the nail heads and the panel to allow for expansion and contraction. The 555 panel features a nail stop to guide in correct nail head clearance. When installing the next panel, like other Cedar Impressions panels, refer to the panel thermometer to determine proper spacing. Gently tap the outside of the hammer tapper ribs to properly position the panel left or right. For the second course, prepare the first panel by cutting 30 inches off of the right side of the panel at indicator 30. Install the panel like previous panels. Center pin the panel by either drilling a 3/16 inch hole into the center of the remaining nail hem or drive nails into both sides of the center nail slot. As you move up the wall, continue to stagger panel courses by cutting 4 inches from the first panel in the third course, 30 inches from the first panel in the fourth course, and so on. For the best appearance and easier installation, we suggest you install the mitered offset corner post as you move up the wall. If you prefer, you can install mitered offset corner posts after the siding has been installed. Begin by removing the nail hem from the corner post to use as your starter. Install with a nail through each nail hole. Be sure to save this cut corner for finishing the final course. Hook the first corner piece over the siding, making sure the corner is locked into the nail hem starter. Nail through the top 2 slots of the corner post. Continue installing the corner pieces up the wall. When you reach the top, use the corner post that was previously cut for the starter as your final piece. Cut it to length so that there is a 1/4 inch space between it and the Cornice receiver. Drill 2 holes at the top and nail in place. Finally, install the cornice molding, followed by the cornice cap for a clean finished look. To install half rounds in a gable end, begin by framing out the gable. In our case, we're using 3/4 inch J channel at the bottom, and we'll be finishing the rakes with a cornice receiver cornice molding combination for a decorative look. You can also frame the entire gable with J channel or with 3.5 inch or 5 inch lineals. If installing above horizontal lap siding, trim the last piece of siding to the proper height. Punch nail slots 1/4 inch from the trimmed edge every 16 inches and loosely nail it in place. Next, install the special starter strip so the bottom edge covers the nail heads in the panel below, but not so low that you nail through the panel when attaching the starter. Gable installations properly terminate with a round centered in the peak. To create this effect, you have to determine two things. First, how many courses of rounds will it take to reach the peak? And second, how to position the bottom row of rounds. To calculate the number of courses required, use the following formula. Gable height divided by 12.5 inches, which is the face exposure of one panel. The gable height is measured from the peak to the bottom of the J channel, in our case 43 inches. So, to determine how many courses we'll need, we divide 43 by 12.5 inches, which is 3.44, or 3 full panels with 44% of another panel. To determine how much 44% of a panel is, multiply 12.5 inches by 0.44, which equals 5.5 inches. So, the visible height of our bottom course will be 5.5 inches. Mark the measurement on the panel, measuring down from the top edge of the gap between two rounds. Draw a cutting line along the entire panel. Cut enough panels to span the base of the gable. The second thing we have to determine is how to end up with a single round centered in the peak of the gable. To do that, we need to properly locate the first starter panel. Begin by marking a vertical plumb line from the peak. Next, mark the position of the top of the starter course, leaving a 1/4 inch for expansion down into the J channel. Strike a horizontal line that will guide nailing of the starter course. The point where the horizontal and vertical lines intersect is the starting point for installing the first piece of the starter course. But you need to determine whether you will center a scallop or a shingle gap at the starting point. This is determined by the number of courses required to finish the gable. The rule of thumb is, you center an upper scallop on the line if the initial calculations had less than 0.5 of the course remaining. In our case, we had 0.44, so we'll be centering a scallop on the line. You should center a shingle gap of the upper course on the line if more than 0.5 of a course remained. In most cases, you'll need more than one panel to reach the plumb line from the left side of the gable. To determine the measurement for the first panel, measure from the plumb line to the left receiving channel, leaving a 1/4 inch for expansion. In our case, 56 inches. Since each panel is 32 inches, this means we need one full panel plus one 24-inch partial panel. To ensure having a full scallop centered in the peak of the gable, subtract 8 inches from the partial panel if your earlier calculation showed that you would need an odd number of full courses to reach the peak, such as in our case with 3 courses. If you require an even number of full courses, subtract 18.5 inches. Cut the first piece of the starter course to length. Then trim it to match the angle of the gable, leaving a 1/4 inch gap between the panel and the cornice receiver. Install the panel by center pinning with 2 nails in one slot, or by drilling a 3/16 inch hole in the center of the remaining panel. Install the starter row across the gable. A gable slope cutting pattern can be useful for cutting panels. To make one, hook a scrap panel onto the starter row. Align a second panel with the gable slope, and mark the gable slope onto the bottom panel. Cut along this angled line, and use it to mark other panels as needed. To determine the measurement for the first panel of the second row, align a full panel on an alignment mark on the nail hem of the starter and tack it in place. Then measure the distance to the Cornice receiver at the bottom and top, leaving a 1/4 inch gap. Mark the panel and cut. Where the nail hem has been removed, drill a 3/16 inch hole in the center of the remaining panel and punch nail slots every 6 to 8 inches. Nail in place, then continue installing across the gable. When you reach the peak, trim the last round to the desired height. Drill a single hole in the peak of the panel and nail the panel in place. Finally, snap in the Cornice receiver, mitered at the top and bottom for a beautiful finished installation. Cedar Impressions' individual shingle products are not designed for roof application. They are designed solely for installation on vertical surfaces. The shingles must be installed over a solid substrate with nail-holding strength such as plywood or OSB, minimum 7/16 inches thick. The surface of the wall must be smooth and even, as the shingles will follow the undulations of the wall. Individual shingles are exterior cladding. They are not a complete weather-resistant barrier. Before applying siding, make certain the substrate is watertight. In order to be protected from precipitation, the substrate may need to be properly flashed around areas such as windows, doors, other openings, and corners, so as to shed water to the exterior. There are 7 different shingle widths that vary from 4 inches to 8 inches. When you open the box, each layer contains 8 shingles, the 7 different widths, plus a second 5.75-inch shingle. Within each color family are 3 shades of shingles: light, medium, and dark. We recommend mixing the shingles in a bin to assure a random appearance on the wall. The widths are listed within the staple zone. Shingles are 12 inches long and the required exposure is 5 inches. Fasten shingles within the fastener target zone using either staples or nails. Use stainless steel staples with 7/16 inch crown, minimum 16 gauge, a minimum of 1 1/2 inches long. If hand nailing through the preformed holes, use stainless steel or hot-dipped galvanized roofing nails a minimum of 1 1/2 inches long, with a minimum head diameter of 5/16 of an inch. Do not use a pneumatic nail gun to install the individual shingles. Shingles can be easily cut with a utility knife or table saw. Using a straight edge, press firmly down with the utility knife to cut through the shingle. Avoid cut scoring and folding the shingle, as this will cause a stress-whitened edge. Instead, continue to cut directly through the shingle. For a precise cut, use a saw equipped with a sharp 40-tooth carbide blade mounted in the standard, not backwards, position. Begin installation by installing all trim and accessories. We recommend using Restoration Millwork cellular PVC trim. If pocketed accessories are desired, a 1-inch minimum pocket height is required. Restoration Millwork lattice can be used in combination with a Restoration Millwork pocketed corners to achieve a 1-inch pocket. Strike a level line around the house to establish a straight reference to guide the positioning of the starter course of siding. The starter course must extend at least 1 inch past the sheathing to allow for proper drainage. The starter row has 2 layers of shingles. Use the full shingle lengths, 12 inches, for the first layer. Position the first shingle a minimum of 1/16 inch from the trim. Fasten each shingle in 2 places. Recommended keyway spacing is 1/4 inch between shingles with an 1/8 inch minimum. The edges should not touch. The keyway joints allow for expansion and prevent buckling. To ensure your installation has a natural appearance, you must be sure to mix shingle widths randomly on the wall. If you are also using multiple color shades, those too must be mixed in for a random appearance. If you have to cut a partial panel for the end of the wall, avoid shingle width of less than 2 inches. Again, there should be a minimum of 1/16 inch gap between the final shingle and the trim. The starter offset line at the top of the panel will aid in aligning the second starter layer, so it extends 1/2 inch below the first layer. Note, the butt line of the lowest course must allow a minimum spacing of 1 inch from decks, patios, roof lines, and other hard surfaces. The remaining courses install as a single layer with a 5-inch exposure. Align the course hash marks with the top of the shingle you're covering. Courses can be adjusted up or down 1/4 inch to accommodate trim heights and achieve full courses over doors and windows. Continue to install random width and color shingles as you work your way across the wall. Be careful, however, that keyway spacing is a minimum of 1 1/2 inches from the shingles in the previous course. When installing around a window or other fixture, shingles must maintain a minimum 1/16 inch clearance from trim. Partial shingles with no staple zone remaining will require pre-drilling and hand nailing. In our case, we just had enough staple zone remaining. Shim if necessary, then apply a trim board to conceal the fasteners. When installing shingles above a window or door, headers must be spaced 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch above the flashing to ensure proper drainage. Finishing the top course of siding at the eaves is just like installing under a window. 2 fasteners are required to secure the shingle to the wall. Partial shingles with no staple zone will require pre-drilling and hand nailing. Apply a trim board over the shingles to conceal the fasteners. Installing shingles in gables and at the rake is similar to finishing the top course under a soffit or window. Cut shingles to the appropriate angle, pre-drill, and fasten using at least 2 staples or nails. Apply a trim board over the shingles to conceal the fasteners.